was inspired by international terrorism.
You won't divide us. We won't be cowed by terrorists.
The location of this attack was no accident.
An attack at the heart of the UK. On Wednesday afternoon, a man drove along the pavement over Westminster Bridge, ploughing into pedestrians, before crashing into the railings outside the Houses of Parliament. The attacker then tried to run into Parliament. He stabbed and killed an unarmed officer before being shot dead by police.
I saw the vehicle mount the curb and it was coming out so quickly. I saw some people be hit in front of me.
A guy came past my right shoulder with a big knife and just started plunging it into the policeman.
The police and emergency services have been praised for their response. British Prime Minister Theresa May described the attack as sick and depraved.
An act of terrorism tried to silence our democracy. But today we meet as normal to deliver a simple message. We are not afraid.
In the aftermath, the focus quickly moved to Londoners picking up the pieces and returning to normality in the face of an attack on the city's very core. This attack is something UK security forces have been preparing for. A matter of when, not if.
The reality is, for a number of years now, the security threat has been severe, which means an attack has been highly likely.
Sadiq Khan has previously said that the risk of terrorism is part and parcel of living in a big city, and it's about managing that risk. In 2005, multiple suicide attacks on London transport killed more than 50 people. Since then, UK police and counterterrorism forces have trained for how to prevent and deal with another attack, and how to ensure the city can still function. Security services say they have foiled 13 terror attacks since 2013, but ones like this in Westminster are harder to see coming. Designed to have maximum impact with low-tech methods. Is this new style a sign that efforts against large-scale attacks are working? And should the government respond with a new means of prevention, if it can at all? Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined now from London by Talha Abdul Razak. He's a researcher at Exeter University's Strategy and Security Institute with a focus on security and counterterrorism. And joining us for the entire program today is Omar Ashur, also from the University of Exeter in southern England. He's a senior lecturer at the Institute of Arab and Islamic Studies and is a leading expert on de-radicalization. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Talha, let me begin with you. What were your immediate thoughts when you heard of the attack, particularly the MO of this attack?
Well, my immediate thoughts were obviously one of, shock and horror. And it's not something that you expect to see in London, although obviously it's a prime target for terrorists. In terms of an MO, I think it's somewhat inaccurate to call this an MO that we can associate with ISIS or any particular terrorist organization. I mean, after all, it's a very low-tech, primitive and very much atavistic way of attacking. Anyone can jump into a car, ram it into people and jump out with knives and start killing. I mean, it's a very, very basic way of killing. It's not a complicated attack as what happened, for example, in the 9/11 terrorist attacks or even the 7/7 bombings, requiring a sophisticated level of preparation, time, resources. So it's something that needs to be looked at in terms of where do these terrorist organizations go to next. So the British security services have become very, very good at stopping these kinds of attacks. They've foiled a number of plots since the 7/7 bombings in 2005. But it's getting increasingly difficult to stop these low-tech attacks, right, as we saw in the Berlin Christmas market and also in Nice.
Okay, so Omar, is that true? The fact that our security services doing so well that all these guys can now resort to is ramming a car or ramming a truck. They can't do these massive, egregious, sort of blockbuster theatrical terror attacks anymore because they'll get nabbed?
That's to a certain degree true. We know for a fact that since June 2013, more than 13 terrorist attempts were foiled by the security services. Many were charged. We know that there is a comprehensive approach in terms of the pillars of the strategy, of the British strategy in terms of counterterrorism, in order to prevent and then to pursue, to protect and to prepare. So most of them, to a certain degree, it's quite comprehensive in that sense. These kind of attacks are quite stealthy. You know, it's very hard to predict them. The good news is that the damage is quite limited. The physical damage is no more than a car accident or a residential fire damage. The bad news is they are less detectable. They are cheap. They cause this media uproar, which the terrorists are quite good in using it for their own propaganda and for own benefits, and also it can not in the London case, because I'll tell you why, but it can negatively affect the social psychology and the social fabric of the society.
So let me jump in there with the social psychology and propaganda and ask Talha, the fact that Al-A'maq, Daesh's media outlet, if you like, came out and said, yes, we did it. Does it even matter whether they did it or not, or if they're just claiming it after the fact? Because no matter what happens, they're going to claim responsibility, and how influential and possibly psychologically devastating can that be?
Whether they did it or didn't do it, or whether they organized it or arranged for it to happen, is a moot point. They would automatically claim anything like this because obviously it boosts their propaganda purposes to show that they can strike at the heart of British democracy and British society as a whole. Psychologically speaking, I mean, this is exactly what they want to do. They want to create this uproar. They want to create a sense of mistrust and hatred between communities. They want to fester divisions. And they want the people of Britain and indeed the wider world to look upon Muslims as a threat. Why? Because if societies react in the way that the Daesh terrorists want them to react, then they will be able to rally more people to their cause and to their twisted ideology. So psychologically speaking, this is a massive victory if we allow it to become a victory for them.
Mm-hmm. Omar, as we speak, a man has been arrested in Antwerp, Belgium, for trying to ram his car. Now, we don't have a lot of details about this, but when people look at London, they see it as part of a pattern, a trend. So they look at London and they say, oh, we've had Paris, we've had Brussels, we've had Nice, we've had Berlin, we've had Istanbul, and so on, and now we have London. Is that the right way of looking at this, as if it's a concerted attempt by Daesh to hit predominantly Western capitals or these major Western symbols around the world?
It is a concerted attempt, even though they're not necessarily, the individuals that do this are not necessarily linked to ISIS in a command and control structure. But we know that since basically September 2014, since the escalation of the coalition operations in Iraq and Syria, Daesh was very clear in saying that we were going to hit back, and they have multiple coverage in their propaganda magazines, Rumiyya and Dabiq, formerly Dabiq, and others, that what they call just terror. And they are basically, either you have the individuals who got trained in ISIS camps and trying to operate in Europe, and that was the Belgium case and the case of Paris attacks. Or you have individuals who are loosely linked. They don't take orders, but they are self-radicalized and self-recruit in many ways. And what inspires them is the propaganda that magazines like Dabiq and magazines like Rumiyya issue. But the interesting part is it just does not stop at inciting violence. It tells you actually how to do it. So you have details in Rumiyya, for example, on how to use a knife in terms of course, for causing damage, or how to use a car and what kind of car, and very, very detailed on operation level on how to do such attacks to cause maximum amount of damage for the authorities. And then there is the complete decentralization, in a sense of saying to the individual, actually encouraging the individuals not to get in touch with the organization via social media or so they cannot get detected. So there is a concerted effort on the part of IS, and I think it primarily has to do with how to deal with the attacks of the coalition, because the attacks of the coalition was quite successful so far. But also there is the self-radicalizers and the self-recruiters that would operate in an easy manner with feasible information on how to do these attacks.
Talha, let's take, for example, historically, say IRA attacks or far-right attacks. Let's put them aside and let's look at attacks that can broadly be put under the umbrella of, say, jihadist attacks. So these predate Daesh as an organization, right? Because that's just a few years old. The 7/7 bombings happened 12 years ago, ostensibly by Al-Qaeda, but even then we don't know if there was a direct link or not. How much of this has to do with Britain having a domestic radicalization problem within its own borders, which might have nothing to do with, for example, as Omar puts it, command and control from Raqqa?
I wouldn't characterize it as a domestic British problem. I mean, that gives it sort of greater weight than it warrants. What I would say is that in every community you're going to have outliers. So rather than looking upon this as a kind of like a British Muslim problem, I think it's wrong to characterize it in that way. I mean, the last major attack involving knives and firearms on British democracy was done by Thomas Mayor, who killed the MP Joe Cox. This was just last year during the whole Brexit
and as I said, let's take the far right. Let's put it aside. Let's look at this sort of thread, right? By those inspired by whatever they're inspired by. How much of it is a domestic problem, and how much of it is an international problem for the UK? For example, you wouldn't say in response to the London attack, Theresa May needs to order the fighter jets to go and bomb Raqqa, right?
No, of course not. I mean, that's the thing is, if you can identify a threat, a credible threat, and you can identify the source of it, then military action is, definitely encouraged, because you could actually hit it at the source. However, what's key to note here is, and as Dr. Ashur was saying, was these are very low tech. These are probably things that, they're very cheap to do. They're very easy. It doesn't require much to get in a car and ram it into people. And you will always have these sick individuals who will look at the glamour that Daesh and other extremists offer to them. And these people are generally nobodies. They have nothing going on in their lives, and they want to be somebodies. So when they commit these attacks, they're hoping for the cameras, they're hoping for the media, they're hoping for the attention. And this is something that, frankly, it's a social thing, it's a political thing, but there should be a concerted effort to prevent the over-glamorization of this violence, and even from the media, which is against it, obviously, they should kind of do their best to kind of kill it off.
Yeah, but I mean, people are dead, right? You've got to cover it. People are dead in a terror attack. How do you not cover it?
Yes, you have to cover it. Of course, you have to cover it. But in terms of the over-analyzation of the problem, I mean, to this day, to this moment, as far as I'm aware, we don't fully know who this individual is. All we know is that he was investigated by MI5 a number of years ago, as the Prime Minister Theresa May said. And she also said that the case was closed. There was no kind of link or present intelligence linking him to a possible attack, as happened yesterday. So when we start overanalyzing the impact of Daesh and the fact that, the Prime Minister said that there was no direct intelligence, that suggests that this was a more kind of off-the-bat kind of operation. There was no systematic planning, there was no massive organizational structure. So when we start overanalyzing, we give them more airtime than they deserve.
Okay, Talha, thanks so much for your thoughts.